Mr. Gomez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Roth, please explain to us why Ms. Marjorie Taylor Greene, or the representative from Georgia, was removed from Twitter.
Thank you for the question, Congressman. My recollection is that her personal account was banned from Twitter after repeated written notices due to repeated violations of the Twitter rules.
Can you add a little specificity to the violation of the Twitter rules?
Yes. Again, I didn't have access to my Twitter email, documents, anything that would have let me prepare to answer that in more detail, but my recollection is that the Congresswoman repeatedly violated Twitter's policies about sharing misinformation about COVID-19. She received multiple written warnings about that conduct. She received multiple timeouts related to that conduct. And then ultimately, consistent with the written and published policy, those repeated violations resulted in her account being permanently suspended.
Mr. Chairman,
so in essence,
I'd like to take a point of personal privilege.
It's still my time.
We'll stop. It's
still my
clock.
It's still my
order,
time.
Mr. Chairman.
Point of order by Mr. Raskins.
Yeah, I don't believe that members of this committee have the right to interrupt someone's testimony because their
Point
name
of
was
personal
mentioned.
privilege.
And-
You were mentioning my name, Mr. Raskin.
Yeah, no, I understand, but that's not the rule, Ms. Greene. I don't think a member.
That is the rule in Congress.
Well, then I'd like
we can take a point
I'd like
of
the
personal
parliamentarian
privilege.
to rule on whether any member of this committee has the right to interrupt a witness's testimony because they mentioned the name of a member of Congress.
You mentioned my name, Mr. Raskin.
Yeah, I'm not testifying.
Chair recognizes Ms. Greene.
Thank you, Mr.
For your
Chairman.
point of privilege, very briefly.
Thank you. For Mr. Roth, who made you in charge of what is true and what's not true?
We'll,
Does she get to reopen her
no,
question?
no,
Okay.
we'll go back to Mr.
Gomez.
Gomez, and Mr. Gomez, please remember the decorum of the committee. The clock, we'll restart the clock now. You didn't lose any time. Chair recognizes Mr. Gomez.
Thank you so much. The gentle lady from Georgia was suspended from Twitter for knowingly and consistently spreading conspiracy theories about COVID-19 vaccine, right? Which is shameful, especially in a pandemic where a million people have lost their lives. With that, I yield my rest of my time to the gentleman from New York, Mr. Goldman.
Thank you, Mr. Gomez. Let's talk about the so-called Twitter files, which my Republican colleagues seem to think are God's gift to journalism. In one about the Hunter Biden laptop, the author says that every single fact in the New York Post story was accurate. And Chairman Comer, I notice you blew up the cover of that New York Post story, which I appreciate you doing that because I'd like to dig into this article. The very first paragraph says Hunter Biden introduced his father to a top executive at a Ukrainian energy firm less than a year before the elder Biden pressured government officials in Ukraine into firing a prosecutor who was investigating the company. That is false. 100% false.
Is the gentleman sure about that?
Yes, in fact, I am sure about that, and as the lead counsel in the first impeachment investigation, we proved that he was actually fired because he was not prosecuting corruption, not that he was fired because he was prosecuting corruption.
Corruption of the president's son's company. I'm sorry, would the gentleman yield corruption of the president's son's company?
I'd like to reclaim my time.
Gentleman's recognized.
The fact that Joe Biden fired, consistent with U.S. policy in every single European country, the prosecutor general in Ukraine because he did not prosecute corruption, including at companies like Burisma, has been proven over and over and over. And if you want to know who actually prosecuted Burisma, Chairman Comer, you should talk to the British authorities, because they were the ones who were prosecuting Burisma, and they couldn't get any cooperation from the Ukrainian prosecutor general. So that's why he was fired. So right off the top, the very first paragraph of this so-called bombshell story is completely false. Now, what is the allegation that we are hearing from our Republican colleagues about the connection to Joe Biden and Burisma? It is an email from a Burisma employee thanking Hunter Biden for organizing a meeting with the Vice President Biden. We know nothing about the substance of that meeting. We know nothing about how long they met. It was not on Vice President Biden's schedule. And in fact, I would ask my Republican colleagues, do you meet with foreign businessmen? Do you meet with foreign diplomats? If we were to say to you every single time you met with somebody that you discussed something that you're voting on, how would you react? It's preposterous. And Chairman Comer, you have said in your opening statement that Joe Biden lied to the American people. That is a bold, bold accusation. And so far, we've seen no actual evidence of any lies or any support for Joe Biden being involved in anything having to do with Ukraine other than promoting U.S. foreign policy. And I hope that you are not abusing the power as chairman of this committee, and that you are not wasting taxpayer dollars on a fishing expedition into a civilian child of a president for political purposes. I yield back.
The gentleman yields